Police brutality against African Americans is an occurrence that the black community has been familiar with all their lives, but has been obliviously sheltered from white America. The televised emergence of video footage showing multiple police officers relentlessly beating Rodney King in 1991 shocked the nation, but the African American community proclaimed that this was a common occurrence. When the police officers in the video were found not guilty in 1992, it sparked nationwide riots and protests of the apparent unjust verdict. The technological advances of the time provided enlightenment of the brutality towards African Americans via video camera. Even though the result of the Rodney King incident led to violent protest, it provided awareness to the United States population. Fast forward 20 years later, unarmed African American teenager Trayvon Martin is shot and killed by neighborhood watchman George Zimmerman. Public outrage had manifested in news media, especially with the acquittal of charges against Zimmerman. Tensions within the African American community exponentially increased with the subsequent years that followed, with a slew of high-profile African American deaths at the hands of police. Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, Freddie Gray, and Sandra Bland are only a few examples of deaths by the police brutality. Technological advances has expanded public exposure to the events through social media. In August 2016, football player Colin Kaepernick did not stand during the pre-game national anthem in protest against police brutality on African Americans. When mainstream media caught wind of Kaepernick's action, it was received with mixed reactions. Supporters applauded his bravery, but others found it to be disrespectful to the flag and to those who have served the country. Numerous other NFL players from all different teams began following suit by taking a knee during the national anthem. The protest began a national dialogue concerning discrimination, police brutality, and patriotism. Many people criticized Kaepernick for leading a protest that involved disrespecting the country. It was Kaepernick himself who stated that he could not stand up to show pride in a flag for a country that opposes black people and people of color. With President Obama in office, critics questioned the authenticity of his protest. However, hindsight will show that Kaepernick's protest has been the most effective, peaceful manner in curbing the brutal police treatment of African Americans. The responsive interaction between the police and the African American community is a prime example of Albert Bandura's reciprocal determinism theory. According to Bandura, the term determinism is used to signify the production of effects by events, rather than the doctrinal sense that actions are completely determined by a prior sequence of causes independent of the individual. The effects of police brutality had caused the African American community to provide a movement that would eliminate targeted racial disparity against them. Black Lives Matter was an organization created in 2012 in response to the shooting of Trayvon Martin. The movement attempted to bring public awareness of discrimination towards black in America, but the execution of the message was lost in translation. Organizations such as Blue Lives Matter and All Lives Matter began to rise in response to the Black Lives Matter movement. Bandura's theory is based upon the notion that the people and the environment have a reciprocal relationship in which both the environment and the people contribute to effects on each other. Reciprocal determinism is an interactional process in which the event can be a stimulus, a response, or an environmental reinforcer. The initiation of Black Lives Matter was a response to social injustice. Increased police coercion was the environmental reinforcer. The NFL protest, spearheaded by Kaepernick, was both a stimulus and a response to police brutality against blacks. With the unavoidable public attention, the police had no choice but to curb their behavior. The supposed consequence that Kaepernick endured for his activism was the eventual release from the NFL. People argue that it was Kaepernick's lack of talent that led to his exclusion. Regardless, in 2018, Kaepernick struck a deal with Nike as the face for their Believe in Something campaign. It was a risky move for Nike, as there were conflicting public sentiments towards the protest. Researchers in the article An Experimental Examination of Activist Type and Effort on Brand Image and Purchase Intentions conducted an experiment to evaluate the effectiveness of brand image and risky activism. Two hypotheses were presented. The first, there will be no statistical difference in perception between risky activism and safe activism on brand image of a sponsor when controlling for brand familiarity. Hypothesis 2. There will be no statistical difference in perception between risky activism and safe activism on purchase intention of a sponsor's product when controlling for brand familiarity. The results of the experiment demonstrated that brand image suffers when a corporation hires a controversial spokesperson. Urki earned polarized praise and criticism for their decision to hire Kaepernick, but their revenue was not affected. Since Kaepernick's peaceful protest, there has been a reduction of prevalent cases of police brutality in the news media. However, it is not unfathomable to believe that racism continues in the police organization. A top-to-bottom cleansing would be the most effective format by replacing all leadership and delinquent personnel, beginning with the commissioner. A less aggressive strategy would be to hire a psychologist into the Internal Affairs Department to conduct periodical evaluations of officers and leaders. The focus of the assessment would be to examine attitudes towards the public and sentiment for minority groups. Further training is also required to prioritize the conservation of human life. During firearms training for the police, the bullseye on the silhouette is in the middle of the chest. Changing the bullseye to the shoulders and knees would condition the officers to impede a threat instead of killing the threat.